Joining us now to talk more about the big banks in the midst of this pandemic is Jeff Harte. He is the person that we've been waiting to talk to about some of these issues and get his response to some of this, too. He's a principal at Piper Sandler. And Jeff, thanks for being here. You know, hearing what everything that Buffett had to say about this, he's a big owner in a lot of different banks. What's your take on how our banks are prepared for it this time around?
Well, I think from what I've heard, Warren made two, I think, very important and accurate points. The first one being this crisis is not a financial crisis, unlike the last one where banks were kind of one of the root causes. Here, they're more the victims. But secondly, and I think just as importantly, people have to remember, banks are very tightly linked to the economy. And to the extent the economy slows as much as it does, banks are going to have some issues along with that, you know, specifically in places like energy and consumer lending. So I don't think you look at the bank universe here and say, boy, they got it made because they're in such a better position. The bank stocks could struggle for a while here, but I don't think we're certainly not going to see kind of the declines we saw last time and the worries about solvency. So I think this is a good time to be looking at banks just to be kind of selective, right? If you can have a longer-term investment horizon, you want to be looking at things that are really beat up, something like a Citigroup or some of the banks that are getting no credit. But if you're kind of a little more worried about the near term, I like names like J.P. Morgan, where you get a lot of safety, but also a lot of upside on the back end. But clearly, economic crises are not good for banks, but banks are looking as good in this one, at least coming into it, as I can ever remember having seen them look before.
All of the big banks took some pretty major write-offs for losses that they expected to come as a result of this. You think that was them being conservative? You think that that's them really sizing things up and saying realistically, this is what we are going to see, we expect?
I think it's a little bit of both. And one thing that really stood out for most of the conference call this quarter is the banks don't have a whole lot more insight than we do as to how long this crisis is going to last or how intense it's going to be. That's different than usual. I'm used to looking at the J.P. Morgans and Bank of Americas and saying, well, they touch so many parts of the economy, they've got a much better feel for what's going on than we do. But with the economy largely shut down, I think they're kind of playing it day by day and hoping to know more in a month or so, too. So that's kind of the interesting kind of oddness here, I guess, is no one really knows quite what the future will hold. I think they've been very conservative in their reserve builds, but as we've seen, I mean, the economic outlook can literally change week by week, so they're probably going to end up being more conservative yet again in 2Q and 3Q. And then hopefully if the economy gets better, we can get into a position of releasing some of these reserves once we get into 2021. But that's kind of the $64,000 question, is how quickly does the economy come back and they can start using these reserves that they're really kind of front-end loading.
You know, the banks were big punching bags after the Great Recession. And at that point, some of them have done some pretty bad behavior, and it attracted that attention. But it seems like we might be getting into that old reflex of, oh, things are bad, let's blame the banks again. You just heard Senator Cardin, who was on with us, who said, yeah, the big banks put their biggest, best clients and customers at the front of the line, and that wasn't right. How much do you worry about political backlash and, you know, the flap that could come when people say, hey, wait a second, you didn't deal with us correctly, you didn't do PPP the way it was intended?
You know, it's always an issue, especially when there's any kind of financial crisis going on, right? As you look for scapegoats, and banks are kind of easy targets historically. So I said, I think we're coming in with the banks in the best shape they've been in, not just from a capital liquidity standpoint, but also I don't see a lot of the lending excesses you typically see coming into a situation like this, kind of the bubble waiting to burst. So that bodes well for the banks as far as not being too much in the crosshairs, but certainly they'll come in the crosshairs, and specifically from a political sense. You know, if someone can make a political case against, you know, the quote unquote fat cat bankers, they'll still go out to do that. I don't think, at least from what I've seen so far, the PPP stuff we've seen has been terribly surprising. I mean, I think given the way the rules were written, you kind of have to expect that the banks would try to take care of the clients that theoretically could cost them the most, or current big lending clients, and try and get them at least squared away first. But by the time we're done with the second round, it sure seems like there's a pretty kind of deep and broad-based spreading out of the PPM and the small business loans. I think the banks are doing kind of the best they can in a tough environment. But make no mistake, when you've got GDP going from growth expectations to very significant declines over a 4 to 6 week period, there's going to be economic pain, and really no amount of federal programs or anything are going to eliminate a lot of that, or all of that at least.